Blue and red lights slid across my dining room wall in slow waves. The sirens were off now. Only the crackle of police radios and a few low voices came from the hallway. My teacup sat in front of me, half full and cold. Across from me, on the edge of my sofa, my daughter-in-law stared at the rug. Her fingers were locked so tight in her lap that her knuckles looked carved from stone. An officer sat beside her, talking in a low, careful voice. She nodded at whatever he said, but her eyes never moved. If you walked in at that moment, you might have thought there had been a break-in or a sudden tragedy. An old woman in a chair, a young wife on the couch. Police moving around a small, tidy house. No shouting, no broken glass. Just a heavy silence, like the air itself was listening. I did not feel sorry for her. What I felt was heavier than joy and quieter than anger. It sat in my chest like a still stone. Relief that I was still in my own chair, in my own home, with my name on the deed. "Mrs. Cole," one of the officers had asked earlier, "do you understand why we're here?" Oh, I understood. My name is Margaret Cole. I am 68 years old. Recently my days were simple. Tea in the morning, a walk through my garden, a call from my son. I buried my husband, worked nights as a nurse, and paid off this house over years. I thought the hardest parts of my life were finished. Instead, I found myself having to fight to stay visible in the home I bought. "I never wanted it to go this far," I said quietly. The young officer by the door glanced over. "Ma'am?" "I never wanted police in my living room," I said. "I just wanted my house to be honest again." He nodded, the way people nod when they do not understand. To me, this house is 40 years of mornings and nights. My husband's last breath, my son's first steps, birthday cakes, quiet grief. And for a while, someone I called family tried to loosen my grip on it. In the doorway, I could see my son's shoulders as he spoke to another officer. Daniel kept dragging his hand through his hair like a nervous boy. I heard only pieces of his voice. "No, I didn't know. She said Mom was getting confused. I thought she was helping." He was wrong about that last part. I had spoken up, more than once. But when an older woman speaks softly, and a younger woman speaks with bright confidence, most people choose the louder certainty. Tonight, for the first time, the room was listening to me. On the couch, Lila's shoulders rose and fell in shallow breaths. She had worn a pale blue blouse, the one that usually made her look gentle and harmless. Under the police lights, the color made her look washed out. I thought of when she first rearranged my kitchen, when she took over my pills to make things easier, when she told me she would handle everything from now on. People like her think only big moves matter. My years have taught me the opposite. It is rarely the grand moments that save you. It is the tiny ones, a taste that is slightly off, a single object resting where it has no right to be. I lifted my cup and drank a swallow of cold tea. It tasted flat, but the simple act soothed me. I had boiled this water. I had opened this box. I had chosen this bag. No one else had stepped into that small ritual. "Are you all right, Mrs. Cole?" the officer by the door asked. "Yes," I said. "Now I am." He gave me a puzzled smile and turned his eyes back to the hallway. My gaze moved around the room, the tablecloth with its faint stain, the roses from my garden bending their heads in the vase, the silver teapot on the sideboard, polished so bright that the blue light slid over it like water. Small things, yet I had almost lost them without a single smashed window, all because I almost ignored one wrong detail. That is what still troubles me when I think back. Not the handcuffs. What unsettles me is how close I came to blaming myself. To saying, "You are old, you must have moved it and forgotten." To turning away from the one tiny thing that did not fit. If I had done that, I would not be sitting here tonight. I would not still be the woman of this house. Across from me, Lila lifted her head. Our eyes met. I watched the smile try to climb onto her face, then fall away when she saw my expression. I was not confused. I was not fragile. I was not blind. She knew then. She knew that I had seen what she never meant for me to see, that I had followed the trail she thought was invisible, all the way to her hands. One careless move had pulled every hidden thread loose. If she had not moved that object in my house, if she had left it exactly where it had lived for years, I might never have known. Before any of this happened, my life was quiet in a way that felt soft, not lonely. My house sits on the edge of a small Maryland neighborhood, the kind where people still wave when they drive past, and where the mailman knows whose dog chases squirrels and whose doesn't. It isn't a grand house, but it holds years inside it, years that smell like coffee in the morning, warm bread on Sundays, and my husband's aftershave that has faded into the wood but never fully left. Most mornings I woke before the sun. Habit, I suppose, after decades of working night shifts at the hospital. I would wrap my shawl around my shoulders, put the kettle on, and stand by the kitchen window while the garden woke up. My husband planted that garden 30 years ago, mint along the edges, roses on the fence, and a small Japanese maple that turns the deepest red in autumn. When he passed, the garden became my way to talk to him. Some women keep journals. I kept a pair of gardening shears. My son Daniel visited every Sunday. Sometimes he brought breakfast. Sometimes he brought laundry because, "Your machine is still gentler than mine, Mom." We would sit on the porch, our mugs warming our hands, talking about everything and nothing. I always thought he was a gentle soul, too soft for the world at times, but steady, like his father. He was the kind of man who apologized when he bumped into furniture. Then came the day he said he was bringing someone special for dinner. I remember standing at the stove stirring soup when he walked in with Lila. She stepped into my house like she belonged there, bright smile, smooth hair, confident posture. At first glance, she was everything a mother hopes her son finds, warm, polite, eager to help. She hugged me tightly, saying, "Daniel talks about you all the time. You must be such a comfort to him." I liked her, I truly did. I saw a woman who could walk with him through life, someone who could be gentle where he needed it and firm where he lacked spine. And I welcomed her with open arms because that's what you do. Homes are meant to stretch when children grow. After they married, Daniel suggested moving in for a little while to save money for a home of their own. I didn't hesitate. I thought of holidays together, shared meals, laughter filling the rooms that had grown quiet. I washed the linens, stocked the pantry, and made space in the closets. It felt like preparing for a new season of my life, one I thought would be warm. The first nights after they moved in were cozy. Lila cooked creamy pasta. Daniel washed dishes. I made tea. They insisted I sit and rest while they worked around the kitchen. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have help, to have presence again in the house. For years I had eaten dinner alone. Suddenly there were voices again, light bouncing off the walls. Lila started joining me in the garden. She would compliment the mint, the flowers, the soil. "This place has so much charm," she would say, touching the leaves lightly. Sometimes she asked about my late husband, where he grew up, what he loved, how long we were married. Her questions felt kind. I answered them with fondness, believing she truly cared. On Sundays, Daniel still brought breakfast, but now it was Lila who carried the plate to me. "Let me help you," she would say, brushing crumbs off the tablecloth even when none were there. She had a way of making everything look polished, like she was preparing the house to be photographed. I told myself she just liked things neat. Looking back, I can see small signs even then, tiny shifts in the atmosphere, like the air moving differently around furniture, but at the time, it all felt harmless. She bought new curtains to brighten the room. She moved my teacups to make the shelf more efficient. She rearranged the spices because the current order didn't make sense. I smiled, letting her. It is hard to complain when someone says they are helping. At night, after they went to bed, I walked through the house quietly, touching the items she had moved, picture frames, bowls, folded towels. They didn't feel wrong, but they didn't feel like mine anymore either. Still, I kept my doubts tucked away. After all, I had invited them in. A shared home must adjust, right? I am telling you this because it matters. My peace was not loud, it was soft and steady. That soft peace was the soil roots grow in. It was also the soil someone like Lila could disturb without making a sound. One evening, Daniel found me watering the plants. "Mom," he said, "Lila thinks you should take it easy. You do too much around here." I laughed, just a small one. "I've been doing this since before you were born." He smiled back, but there was something new in his eyes, something that said he believed Lila more than me. I ignored it. I told myself he was tired, distracted, adjusting to marriage. But small things add up. A neighbor once said, "Your daughter-in-law has such presence." I laughed it off then. Now I realize presence can be a gentle hand or a shadow stretching where it doesn't belong. Still, I opened my home wider. Lila began managing the bills to help. Daniel let her. She took over the grocery shopping to save me the trouble. She insisted on organizing my pantry so you don't strain your back. She handled my medication refills because the pharmacy is confusing. I didn't see these as intrusions, not then. They were just signs of a modern woman, confident, capable, opinionated. I told myself that the world moves faster now, and I just needed to catch up with it. There is a strange thing about kindness. When given too freely, it can blind you. I didn't know then that kindness can be an open door or a trap waiting quietly on the other side. At the end of that second week, I stood in the hallway late at night, looking at framed photographs of my family. My son's childhood smile, my husband's steady hands resting on my shoulder, the Christmas where we all wore matching sweaters. The house felt full again. I thought life had given me a second chance at a family under one roof. I wish I could hold the woman I was then, touch her cheek gently and say, "You don't see it yet. But the house is shifting, inch by inch. Pay attention. Not everything that shines is warm." But I didn't know. Not yet. And soon, very soon, my quiet little world would stop feeling like mine at all. It's strange how a home doesn't lose itself all at once. It happens quietly, like a slow fade of color you don't notice until the wall looks different in the morning light. That was how it began for me, not with shouting, not with a fight, just little things. The first sign was the living room shelf. I have a habit, one small, silly habit I've kept since my husband died. Every evening before bed, I straighten the books on the shelf. Not to clean them, not to fix anything, just to feel the quiet weight of routine. I line the spines, tap them once, then turn off the lamp. It's my way of saying goodnight to the house. One morning, I saw the books arranged by color. It was pretty, I won't lie, but it wasn't mine. "Isn't it better this way?" Lila asked when I mentioned it. Her voice was cheerful, like she had saved me from chaos I didn't know I had. I forced a smile. "It's very organized." She leaned in, breathing in the room. "Homes should feel refreshed, don't you think?" I wanted to say, "This home is already alive. It doesn't need refreshing." But I stayed quiet. It felt too small a thing to protest. The next week, my teacups went missing. Not all of them, only the 2 cups my husband and I used on Sunday mornings. They were old, chipped on the rim, almost useless, but they were ours. I found them weeks later in a donation box in the garage. "Oh, I thought you'd thrown them out," Lila said when I asked. I hadn't thrown them out. I would never throw them out. But I didn't want to start an argument over cups, so I just nodded. "It's all right." That was mistake number 1, telling myself everything was all right. Soon after, the mail started arriving opened. At first, I thought the envelopes had torn in transit, but the cuts were too clean, too straight. When I asked the mailman if something strange was happening, he shook his head. "Everything looks normal on my end, ma'am." Normal. Funny how that word can shapeshift. A few days later, a neighbor stopped me while I was pulling weeds in the garden. "How are you feeling these days?" she asked gently. "Feeling? Well, your daughter-in-law said you've been a bit forgetful lately." Forgetful? I felt my heartbeat slow, almost pause. She said that? "Oh, don't worry," my neighbor said quickly. "She said stress does that. It happens to all of us." I smiled politely, but inside something tightened. I didn't understand why Lila would say something like that. I wasn't forgetful. I kept notes, lists, reminders. I always had. That evening I asked Lila about it. She laughed. "You know how neighbors are," she said, "always twisting things. I just mentioned you seemed tired last week." I tried believing her. Truly, I did. But then the medicine bottles moved. I take only 3 pills, 2 in the morning, 1 at night. I lay them out on the counter every Sunday for the week ahead. I've done this for years. I know the rhythm. I know the order. I know the way they look when I leave them. One morning, the labels faced the wrong direction. A tiny thing. So tiny someone else would have shrugged, but I froze. I hadn't touched them since last night. Daniel wasn't home that morning. That left only one person. I went through the rest of the day pretending nothing bothered me, but I checked everything: drawers, cabinets, shelves, little shifts everywhere, like someone walking behind me, adjusting my shadow. Food started tasting different too salty, too sweet, too something. And then there were my mornings. For years I woke rested. Recently I woke heavy-headed and foggy. Not dizzy enough to collapse, just clouded, like my thoughts were trapped behind slow-moving glass. When I mentioned it to Lila, she pressed her hand to her chest. "Oh no. Are you feeling sick? Maybe you're not eating well. I've been telling Daniel we should take over your meals." She insisted on making my breakfast, on preparing my tea, on helping with my vitamins. At night, Daniel would say, "Mom, you're lucky. Lila is so caring." And I would smile because that was easier than saying I wasn't sure what I felt anymore. Daniel began changing too. He wasn't cruel, not even close, but he stopped asking me what I preferred. He stopped noticing what was missing. He stopped hearing the small tremble in my voice. He trusted her, and she knew it. One afternoon, I caught Lila standing in my bedroom doorway. Just standing. Just looking. She didn't see me at first. She was staring at my husband's photo on the dresser. When she finally turned and saw me, she smiled as if she'd been doing nothing at all. "I was just checking if you needed laundry done," she said. My laundry basket was empty. I didn't say anything. I simply moved past her. But inside my chest, something cold settled. The house felt different. Not like a home, like a stage someone else was decorating for a play I didn't audition for. Neighbors visited less. Friends stopped dropping by. Everyone said Lila made them uncomfortable. "She has a sharp way of looking at people," my friend Mary whispered once. "Always like she's grading us." More things went missing. A silver spoon, an old scarf, a jewelry set my mother left me. When I asked Lila, she blinked innocently. "You probably misplaced them. It happens when we get older." Older, not old. Older. A small word with a sharp edge, but I swallowed it. I kept telling myself I was imagining things, that women my age sometimes worry too much, that maybe I was tired or forgetful or clumsy with my routines. I gaslit myself long before anyone else needed to. And then came the moment I couldn't explain away. It was late evening. Daniel had already gone to work for a night shift. Lila was in the shower. I walked to the hallway closet to grab a fresh towel. The closet has a lock. A small, nearly invisible lock only my husband and I ever used. I keep a few personal items there, old letters, documents, things too sentimental to display. The door was unlocked, just slightly, barely noticeable, but open. And the key, my key, was turned the wrong direction. That tiny detail froze me harder than the coldest winter. Because I always turn it left, always. Someone had turned it right. A small thing, so small anyone else would have ignored it, but it was enough to unravel everything. I stood there staring at that lock, and I felt the ground shift under me. Something was wrong, not imagined, not emotional, not age. Real. Real enough that I touched the doorknob with trembling fingers and whispered to myself, "Someone touched what they had no right to touch." And that was the moment my home finally stopped feeling like mine. The moment that would lead to everything that came next. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly above me, trying to convince myself the unlocked closet had been an accident. Maybe I had forgotten to turn the key all the way. Maybe I had been distracted. Maybe I was tired. I told myself every excuse an older woman tells herself when she is afraid to believe her own instincts. But deep down I knew. In the morning I went to the closet again. The key was still turned the wrong way. The door was still open by the tiniest gap. The sunlight from the hallway hit the floor inside at a strange angle, and I noticed something else. One cardboard box had shifted slightly out of place. Just an inch, maybe less, but enough. I felt something cold crawl down my spine. I closed the door gently and locked it again. This time I turned the key slowly, deliberately, listening to the sound it made. It clicked in a way I knew well, solid, final. I stood there for a long time, my hand resting on the knob, my breathing controlled. I didn't want to panic. Panic makes people sloppy. Panic makes people easy to gaslight. So I went downstairs and made tea. Tea has always been my way of thinking. The kettle's whistle gives me a moment to ground myself. The steam helps me focus. But even the steam felt different that morning, too sharp, too heavy. When Lila walked into the kitchen, she was humming. Her hair was tied up in a neat bun. She looked fresh, rested, ready to take on the day. She looked exactly like a woman with nothing to worry about. "Morning," she chirped. "You're up early." "I couldn't sleep," I said quietly. She opened the fridge and pulled out berries. "Maybe try the sleep gummies I bought. They helped me a lot this week." I didn't answer. Instead, I watched her hands move through the kitchen, confident, quick, comfortable. Too comfortable. After she left for her yoga class, I sat at the table for a long time, staring at the same place she had stood. My tea had gone cold by then. My hands were still wrapped around the cup, but I couldn't feel the warmth anymore. That was the moment something shifted inside me, something quiet, steady, and sharp. I realized I needed proof. Not suspicions, not feelings, proof. Because women like me are only believed when we can prove what our bones already know. I started with something simple: time. I replayed the last few weeks in my mind, the missing cups, the reorganized shelves, the opened mail, the strange taste in food, the misplaced medicines, the way Daniel brushed off my concerns. Every small thing formed a pattern I could no longer ignore. But I needed something more concrete. So I did something I never imagined doing. I pulled out the small camera my sister had given me years ago. "Just for safety," she'd said. I had laughed back then. I lived in a quiet neighborhood. What could possibly happen? Funny how life teaches you what you thought you'd never need. I held the camera in my hand for a long time, feeling its weight. It wasn't heavy, but the responsibility of using it was. I placed it in the hallway, angled toward the closet. Not obvious, not hidden, just part of the clutter. It blinked once, quietly, as if it understood the task. Then I waited. That afternoon I pretended to take a nap. I left my door slightly open, enough to let the house think I wasn't watching. I heard Lila moving around. Her footsteps were light, almost floating. She paused outside my room. I kept my breathing even, slow. After a moment, her steps moved away. A few minutes later, I heard the soft click of a door. The closet. My heartbeat pounded like a drum against my ribs, but my face stayed still on the pillow. I counted breaths. I waited until the footsteps faded. Then I forced myself to stay in bed for 5 more minutes. Panic can ruin everything. I needed to move like water, not fire. When I finally walked to the hallway, the closet was closed again, locked. My key hung where I always kept it. But I knew. I retrieved the camera with shaking hands and carried it to my bedroom. I plugged it into my laptop, praying the battery hadn't died. The first few seconds of footage showed only the empty hallway. Then Lila appeared. She looked around once, just once, then knelt by the closet. She reached up, took the key from my hook, and unlocked the door. She didn't rush. She didn't hesitate. She didn't even look guilty. She looked practiced. She opened the door and went straight to the box I had noticed earlier. She lifted the lid and pulled out a folder, my husband's old documents, the ones he told me to keep safe. She flipped through them with a small smile on her face, a smile I had never seen before. It wasn't warm. It wasn't polite. It was calculating. She took photos with her phone, page after page. Then she put everything back exactly where she found it, closed the box, locked the closet, and returned the key to its place. The whole time she wore the expression of someone doing something necessary. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Then I watched the next part and it chilled me deeper. She looked straight into the camera, into the lens, as if she sensed something. Her eyes paused, not in fear, in thought. Then she adjusted her hair and walked away. I closed my laptop gently, afraid even the sound would disturb the air around me. This wasn't imagination. This wasn't age. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was invasion. Of privacy. Of trust. Of my home. I sat on the bed with my hands covering my mouth, trying not to cry. Crying felt too small for what I had seen. Too weak. What I felt wasn't sadness, it was clarity, sharp as broken glass. My instincts had been right all along, and now I knew why the house didn't feel like mine anymore. Someone else had claimed it, someone with a plan, someone who thought I wouldn't notice, because of my age. I needed air. I walked outside, stood on the porch, and breathed in the cold evening breeze until the shaking in my hands stopped. Neighbors were passing by, ordinary people with ordinary days. I felt like I had stepped out of my own life into a different, darker place. When Daniel came home later, he kissed me on the cheek and asked how my day was. I opened my mouth to tell him everything, but then I saw Lila behind him. Her smile was soft, gentle, caring, the same smile she had worn before unlocking my closet. And Daniel didn't know. He had no idea he was living between two different versions of the same woman. I closed my mouth. It was fine, I said, because telling him the truth then would have broken him before I was ready, and I needed him whole if I was going to protect both of us. That night, lying in bed, I played the video in my head again, over and over, until the images sharpened into resolve. That tiny detail, the wrong turn of a key, had opened a door I never expected. And once you see the truth, you can never unsee it. I whispered to myself in the dark, this isn't just about the closet. It's about everything she plans to take. And with that, the fear inside me shifted into something sturdier, something colder. A beginning. The night after I watched that video, sleep sat on the edge of my bed and refused to let me close my eyes. Every time I blinked, I saw Lila on the small screen again, calm, neat, opening my closet, lifting the box of papers my husband left me, her face as relaxed as if she were folding laundry. It would have been easier to lie to myself, to say the camera glitched or I misunderstood, to blame age, grief, or too much television. But some things, once seen, settle into your bones. My bones were very clear. This woman was not just tidying. She was planning. By morning, my body felt heavy, but my mind was clearer than it had been in months. I moved slower than usual, but each step felt deliberate, like I had finally realized I was walking through someone else's plan. Lila was already in the kitchen when I came downstairs. The smell of coffee filled the room, dark and rich, but it felt like another one of her costumes. "Morning, Mom," she said, smiling. "You're up early again. Maybe we should talk to your doctor about your sleep." "I'll manage," I said. "I've had worse nights." She studied me for a moment. "You look tired." "I am," I replied, "but I'm not confused." Something quick and sharp flickered behind her eyes, then smoothed out. "Well," she said lightly, "if you want, I can reorganize your meds again. You mixed them up last week, remember?" "I remember enough," I said quietly. After breakfast, Daniel kissed my cheek and hurried out, thanking her for packing his lunch. When the door closed, only our breathing and the hum of the fridge remained. "Lila," I said, wiping the table, "can we talk?" She didn't look up from her phone. "About what?" "About my closet," I said, "the one I keep locked. It was open yesterday, and the box with my husband's papers was moved." She finally lifted her eyes. "Maybe you forgot to lock it," she said. "It happens." "I never forget that lock," I said, "and I never put the key back on the hook if it's open." Her lips pressed together. "Are you accusing me of something, Margaret?" "I'm saying some things in this house are mine," I replied, "and someone touched them without asking." "You shouldn't stress yourself like this," she answered. "Daniel worries when you start imagining things. He said you've been more forgetful." The words landed cold. She had already started rewriting me. In that moment I saw the road she was building. Worried husband, caring daughter-in-law, confused old woman. A gentle suggestion somewhere that maybe someone else should handle my home and my money. "I don't want to fight," I said at last. "Let's drop it." Her shoulders relaxed. "That's best," she said. "Stress isn't good for you." I nodded and changed the subject. Out loud, we spoke about groceries. Inside, something in me hardened like cooling glass. That afternoon, I noticed the mail. Only 2 envelopes sat on the hall table, both for Daniel. I was waiting for a letter from the insurance company. "Nothing else came?" I asked. "No, that's all," she said. "Maybe tomorrow." Later, while the shower ran upstairs, I slipped outside and opened the mailbox myself. It was empty. No letters, no flyers, not even the free community paper. It looked wiped clean. I stood there with my hand on the cold metal and understood. She wasn't just inside my closet. She was standing between me and the outside world. Back in the kitchen, I opened the cabinet where I kept my medicine. The bottles stood in a neat line, labels facing front. Too neat. I picked one up. The cap was tighter than I ever left it. I twisted it off and tipped a pill into my palm. White, oval, ordinary. When I lifted it to my nose, there was a faint bitter smell under the usual chalky scent. I put the pill back and closed the bottle. My heart did not race. It slowed, heavy and steady. Humiliation washed over me, not because she had tricked me, but because I had softened every red flag with polite words. I had called myself sensitive, old-fashioned, too attached, anything but what I really was, in danger. That evening I tried to talk to Daniel. We sat in the living room with the television murmuring in the background. Lila was upstairs with the children. For once it was just the two of us. "Daniel," I said, "I need you to listen to me carefully." He muted the TV. "What's wrong, Mom?" "I think Lila has been going through my private things," I said. "My closet, my papers, and I think my medicine has been changed." His eyebrows shot up. "Mom, that's serious." "I know," I answered. "That's why I'm telling you." "Have you asked her?" "Yes," I said. "She says I'm confused, forgetful." He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "You've been under a lot of stress, since Dad died, and us moving in, it's a lot." "I may be sad," I said. "I am not misreading locks and pill bottles." He looked torn. "Lila handles everything, bills, calls, prescriptions. She's never given me a reason to doubt her." "Do you have a reason to doubt me?" I asked. He stared at the dark television screen. "I don't know what to think," he admitted. That hurt more than if he had said no. "Maybe we should talk to a doctor," he added, "just to be safe, for everyone's peace of mind." I heard what he meant, for his peace, for hers. If I pushed harder, I saw exactly where the conversation would go. Her story about my confusion would grow roots. My fear would become another symptom. So I did something that felt like swallowing glass. "Maybe you're right," I said softly. "Maybe I'm just tired. Let's leave it for now." Relief washed over his face. He squeezed my hand. "We're just trying to help, Mom." Later, alone in my bedroom, I sat on the floor with my back against the bed. The house hummed. Through the wall, I could hear their voices blending together upstairs. I looked at my hands resting in my lap. These hands had carried him as a baby, signed every check for this house, planted every rosebush outside. Now someone wanted to turn them into proof that I could not handle my own life. Tears came, hot and quiet. I let them fall. I grieved the version of old age I thought I would have, soft, simple, held by family instead of cornered by them. Then I wiped my face and spoke into the empty room, to the woman inside me who refused to vanish. "If she wants a war," I whispered, "I will not fight it with shouting." I would fight it with paper, with dates, with quiet witnesses. I had spent my life watching people carefully, patients, doctors, administrators, grieving families. I knew how stories were built. I knew how they fell apart. That night my heartbreak stopped being just pain and became a line in the sand. I went to bed with one clear promise to myself. I would not waste another word trying to convince her. From now on, I would collect proof, piece by piece, until the truth could stand in the room without me raising my voice at all. I woke up the next morning before the sun. The house felt different, like it was holding its breath. For weeks I had been stumbling through fog, hurt, confused, embarrassed. But that morning, something in me had changed. I no longer felt like prey. I felt like someone finally opening her eyes. I moved quietly through the kitchen. Even the floorboards didn't squeak. I boiled water for tea, but I didn't drink it. I only let the kettle whistle, long and sharp. I wanted to hear the sound of something I controlled. Then I sat at the small table with a notebook I hadn't touched in years. A gift from my husband, with a green fabric cover and a little gold ribbon. I opened it and wrote one word at the top of the first page: evidence. For a long time I stared at that word. It grounded me. It told me I was not imagining anything. When people lie, they twist words, but documents don't twist. Dates don't twist. Cameras don't twist. I wrote the date. Then I wrote everything I remembered: the closet, the pill bottle, the missing mail, Daniel's worried face when I tried to warn him. When I finished, I turned the page and kept writing. When Lila came downstairs 2 hours later, I had already filled 6 pages. "Good morning," she said, tying her robe. "You're up early again." "I couldn't sleep," I replied. She took one look at the open notebook, and I saw her eyes tighten before she forced a smile. "Writing helps, doesn't it? Maybe you can jot down your dreams, too." I closed the notebook gently. "It helps," I repeated. The way she exhaled told me she hated not knowing what I had written. From that moment, she began watching me more closely, but she couldn't stop me from watching her back. The first part of my plan was simple. I needed clean samples, medication, tea, anything she touched. So when she went upstairs to get ready, I carefully photographed every bottle in my cabinet: labels, expiry dates, the number of pills inside. I placed the bottles back exactly the way I found them: angle, position, everything. Then I took 3 unused tea bags from the pantry, sealed them in a plastic bag, and wrote the date on it with a black pen. My hands didn't shake. In fact, I felt calmer than I had in months. When Lila came down later and offered me tea, I smiled softly. "Not today," I said. "My stomach is a little unsettled." She hesitated, just for a second, but enough for me to see that my refusal bothered her. "Do you want me to make ginger tea instead?" she asked. "No," I said. "I'm fine." Her kindness sounded like glass, smooth but ready to cut. The second part of my plan involved eyes she couldn't charm or manipulate. Behind the stack of porcelain bowls in the cupboard was a small button camera I had ordered online late at night after seeing the footage of her in my closet. I hid it inside an old sugar bowl with a missing lid, the kind my mother had used decades ago. No one touched it anymore. It made the perfect hiding spot. The camera faced the counter where she usually prepared my tea. That afternoon, when she set her handbag on the counter, I watched her glance around the kitchen. Then she reached for my pill organizer. She lifted it, turned it toward the window, then placed it exactly back where it had been. But she didn't know I had taken a photo that morning. When she walked away, I checked the organizer. 1 pill was gone. Just 1. I wrote it down. The third part of my plan required help. Quiet help, smart help. I walked to Mrs. Barlow's house across the street and told her the truth. Not everything, just enough. Her daughter worked in medical administration and knew which clinics were trustworthy. "My dear," she whispered, taking my hands gently, "you're doing the right thing. Let me help." Her daughter arranged a private appointment for me under my maiden name. That way no one, not Lila, not Daniel, would be notified. I gave blood samples, urine samples, everything they needed. The doctor was kind, careful, and didn't treat me like I was fragile. "We'll rush these tests," he said. "If something is in your system, we'll find it." When I returned home, I hid the receipts and forms inside a hollow cookbook my husband once made as a joke. Lila never cooked from scratch. She wouldn't open it. The fourth part of the plan was the most important. I needed legal protection before confronting anyone. I found the number of a local elder law attorney, a woman named Priya Patel, and called from the car while pretending to go grocery shopping. I expected her to rush me, but she didn't. She listened quietly for nearly an hour. When I finished, she said, "This isn't confusion. It's patient manipulation, and you're not alone." Her voice made me cry, not because of fear, but because someone finally saw what I saw. She told me exactly what to do next. Keep a logbook. Photograph everything. Store original samples away from the house. Do not confront Lila until we have everything airtight. And most importantly, change nothing in your behavior. If she senses you know, Priya warned, she will rush her plan. That was the first moment I realized Lila already had a plan, and I was only now stepping into the middle of it. So I became quiet like deep water. At dinner I smiled. I thanked her for cooking. I let her believe I was slipping back into the soft, trusting version of myself she preferred. But every night, after the house fell into silence, I sat at my desk with a lamp glowing beside me. I wrote down each detail with the patience of someone knitting a net, slow, steady, impossible to escape once finished. I kept the notebook hidden in the lining of my winter coat. Lila would never check a coat in early summer. Every morning I checked the camera battery. Every night I backed up the footage to a drive I hid beneath the false bottom of my sewing box. 2 weeks passed this way. Lila believed she was winning, but each day she moved, touched, or adjusted something, she unknowingly left another breadcrumb for me. The house no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a chessboard, and for the first time, I knew exactly which move would win the game. The last sentence I wrote in my notebook that night was simple. Everything is ready. All I need now is the right day. And that day would come sooner than she ever expected. I chose a Thursday. Thursdays have always been quiet in my neighborhood, people at work, children at school, fewer eyes watching. I needed stillness for what was coming. The night before, I barely slept. I lay awake thinking of the girl I used to be, the one who followed storms instead of fearing them. My husband once told me, "You do not shout to fight. You wait until the room is quiet. Then you speak." On Thursday morning, the room of my life was finally quiet. I cooked early, not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because familiar smells calm me. I baked my husband's favorite lemon chicken, mashed potatoes with rosemary, vegetables steamed with garlic. Comfort food, peaceful food, food that said, "This is my home, and I can still create warmth in it." Around noon, I laid everything on the dining table. 3 plates, 3 glasses, a folded napkin at each place. The sun came through the window in long bands of gold, and for a moment I just stood there, letting the light warm my face. I wanted to remember that moment, the stillness before the storm finally breaks. At 1 o'clock I called Daniel. "Lunch today?" I asked softly. "I made your favorite chicken." He sounded tired, almost guilty. "Sure, Mom. We'll be there in 10. We, of course. When their car pulled in, I saw Lila step out first. She always stepped out first, as if she was the center of every scene. Her hair was perfect, her expression unreadable. Daniel walked slightly behind her, looking thinner than usual. My heart squeezed for him. He still had no idea what kind of net he had been caught in. "Smells amazing," he said when I opened the door. "Thank you," I replied. "Come in." I noticed Lila scanning the hallway, her eyes moving from picture frames to the small table near the stairs. She checked for changes, like a guard returning to her post. When she didn't see anything new, she relaxed. Good. I wanted her relaxed. We sat at the table. I served them carefully, slowly, the way I used to serve guests when I was newly married. Lila complimented the potatoes. Daniel asked about my sleep. The conversation felt normal, almost soft. But under the table, my hand rested on my notebook. I could feel the weight of everything inside it. Halfway through the meal, I began. "Daniel," I said gently, "I want to show you something after we finish eating." He looked up, confused. "What is it?" "Just something small," I replied. "A detail." The word made Lila's fork pause in midair. Only for a moment, but I saw it. We finished eating in silence. Then I rose slowly and walked to the kitchen counter, where a small envelope sat beside the fruit bowl. I placed it on the dining table, right in front of Daniel. "Open it," I said. He blinked, then slid a finger under the flap and pulled out the photographs I had printed, pictures of my pill organizer, taken before and after the missing doses. Photos of tea bags in sealed bags with dates. Photos of receipts. Some pages had handwritten notes with times and observations. "What is this?" he asked. "My log," I said calmly. "The things you told me I imagined." Lila smiled too quickly. "Oh, come on, she's been stressed. She misunderstands things. You said so yourself." Daniel looked torn, caught between the woman who raised him and the woman he wanted to protect. I didn't speak yet. I let the silence work for me. He picked up another photo, one of the pill organizer with a missing tablet. His voice cracked. "Mom, why didn't you show me this earlier?" "I tried," I said softly, "but every time I spoke, I became the problem." Leela rolled her eyes. This is ridiculous. Maybe you forgot you took it. Maybe you dropped it. Anyone can make mistakes. That's true, I replied. Anyone can make mistakes, but cameras don't. I reached into the kitchen drawer and took out a small flash drive. I placed it next to the envelope. What's on that? Daniel asked. Footage, I replied. Footage from a button camera hidden inside the sugar bowl. Leela's face changed. The mask slipped. It was small, quick like a shadow crossing water, but I saw it. Her eyes widened, and something sharp flashed across her features. You filmed me? She whispered. I filmed my kitchen, I said. How you appeared in the frame was your choice. Daniel's hands shook as he reached for the drive. Mom, what did you record? I didn't answer. Instead, I walked to the counter and picked up another item, a thick folder. Inside were printed screenshots, notes from the clinic, my attorney's instructions, and test results showing traces of substances in my blood that I had never been prescribed. When I placed the folder on the table, the sound echoed. Daniel stared at it like it was a weapon. I don't understand, he said, voice trembling. Lila, what is this? She laughed, too loud, too rehearsed. Are you kidding? She's setting me up. Look at her. She's confused. She's probably been taking the wrong pills herself. I sat down slowly. I'm not confused. And I haven't changed a single pill without photographing it first. You can ask the lab. Lab? Daniel whispered. The samples were tested, I said. Results came back yesterday. All the color drained from Lila's face. Daniel, I continued, you told me to trust her. You told me she wanted to help. But I have spent months trying to understand why my body felt strange, why some days I couldn't think clearly, why I kept forgetting small things. He looked at his wife. Is this true? Lila, tell me the truth. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I didn't. Your mother is exaggerating. She's unstable. My voice remained steady. Then why did you go through my financial documents? Why were you whispering on the phone about transferring the deed? Why did you put my mail in your purse 2 weeks ago? Daniel's head snapped toward her. What mail? She didn't answer. That was when the doorbell rang. 3 soft chimes. Perfect timing. Daniel shot to his feet. Who is that? I folded my hands. Someone who needs to be here. He opened the door and my attorney, Priya Patel, stepped inside. Behind her were 2 officers. Not dramatic, not aggressive, just present. Lila froze like a statue. Daniel stared at me, betrayal and relief battling in his eyes. Mom, you called the police. No, I said gently. I called someone who could protect me. The police came because of what they saw. Priya stepped forward. Mrs. Hale, as discussed, this is now a formal investigation. We need to speak with your daughter-in-law privately regarding the findings. Lila stood up so quickly her chair scraped the floor. This is insane. You can't arrest me based on her imagination. Priya raised one eyebrow. We are not arresting you. We are asking questions based on physical evidence. You are welcome to refuse, but that will only make things more difficult later. Daniel whispered, Lila, what did you do? And for the first time since she entered my life, she had no answer. The officers escorted her to the porch. Daniel followed slowly, like a man watching his entire world tilt. I stayed at the table, hands folded, breathing quietly. When the door closed behind them, I felt something inside me settle. Not joy, not triumph, something calmer. Ownership of my home, of my truth, of my voice. When Daniel returned inside 20 minutes later, he looked older, broken, softened. He sank into the chair across from me. I'm so sorry, Mom, he whispered. I reached out and placed my hand over his. This house is mine, I said quietly. But my heart, you never lost that. Not once. He cried then, silent, heavy tears dropping onto the table. I didn't move. I let him grieve the truth. Outside, I heard murmurs, neighbors, the officers, the sound of footsteps. Inside, the air felt lighter. And as I watched my son try to understand the ruins of the life he thought he knew, I realized something. Lila finally understood, too. She understood whose home this truly was. The police car did not leave with sirens. It rolled down our quiet street like any other car, gentle and slow. That calm almost felt dishonest to me. My life had just broken open in the middle of my dining room, and outside the world went on as if nothing had happened. From the corner of my eye, through the lace curtain, I saw shapes on the porches. A neighbor pretending to sweep. Another one checking her mailbox twice. They had seen uniforms at my door. They had watched my daughter-in-law walk out between them. I stayed at the table. I did not stand at the window to watch them drive away. I had been the quiet observer long enough. This part did not need my eyes. It needed witnesses who wore badges and carried forms. Daniel stood by the doorway, one hand pressed flat against the frame, like he needed it to hold him up. When the car finally turned the corner and disappeared, his shoulders sagged as if some string inside him had been cut. "Everyone saw," he said. His voice sounded hollow. "Yes," I answered. "Everyone saw." He sat down across from me. The table was still set from lunch, plates with dried sauce, 3 glasses of water, the silver teapot between us like a prop left behind after the actors had gone home. "They'll talk," he whispered. "Of course," I said quietly, "but they would have talked more if I had left here in an ambulance, or not at all." He flinched and dropped his gaze. His fingers twisted the edge of his napkin until it tore. "I should have protected you," he said. I shook my head. "You believed your wife. That is not a sin, Daniel. It is only a risk." Priya, my lawyer, stepped back into the room then. She closed the front door with a soft click and sat at the corner of the table, her folder in front of her like a small shield. "Mrs. Hale," she said, "the officers have what they need to move forward. Your statements, the videos, the lab reports. You did exactly what you were supposed to do." Doing everything right still did not feel like victory. It felt like reaching the shore shivering and barefoot, with the ship sinking behind you. Daniel looked at her with red eyes. "What happens now?" She kept her tone calm and factual. "They will question her at the station. There will be more testing, more paperwork. The charges may take time, but the pattern is clear. This was not an accident. It was a plan." He stared at the silver teapot. "She told me Mom was confused. She said she was just helping." "People who harm others rarely describe it that way," Priya replied. "They use words like care, protection, responsibility. It makes it easier to control the story." After she left, I walked her to the porch. Across the street, Mrs. Barlow stood on her steps, arms folded in her sweater. She met my eyes and gave one firm nod. No pity, no shock, just simple recognition. "You are not alone," Priya murmured. "For the first time in a long time," I said. "I know." Inside, Daniel had picked up one of the photos from the envelope. The still image showed Lila's hands over my pill organizer, fingers pinching what should never have been there. "How did I miss this?" he asked. "You were tired," I said gently. "You were working 2 jobs. She answered questions before you could form them. She sat between us and translated everything I did into something that suited her." He looked up. "Did you hate me?" The question cut deeper than any test result. "No," I said. "I was angry, yes, hurt, but hate? No. If I had turned my anger toward you, she would have won twice." He swallowed hard. "She said you were dramatic, that you needed attention, that you forgot things and then blamed people." "Abusers understand stories," I answered. "They rehearse their lines. They know which version will make them look like the hero." For a long time we sat without speaking. The house sounded different already. No clink of Lila's bracelets, no careful sliding of drawers, just the clock ticking, the refrigerator humming, and my son breathing unevenly across from me. In the afternoon, an officer returned to collect the physical evidence. He moved slowly around my kitchen, taking photos of the kettle, the cabinets, the shelf where my medicine once stood. He labeled bags with neat handwriting. My home turned into a set of exhibits in a case file. I thought I would feel invaded. Instead, I felt something close to relief. For months, the danger had been invisible, brushed off as imagination. Now at last it had a number, a label, a place in someone else's hands. When he left, I opened a window. Cool air rushed in, carrying the smell of cut grass and traffic. It pushed against the heavy taste of fear that had lived in my kitchen for too long. By evening, the street had gone back to its usual noises. Children shouted over a game. A dog barked at a passing bicycle. Behind those normal sounds, I could feel the small buzz of curiosity. Phones would be busy. Stories would twist and grow. For a moment, shame rose in my chest, hot and sharp. Part of me wanted to hide the whole thing, to keep it behind closed doors. Then I remembered the nights when I could not stand without holding the counter. I remembered the mornings I woke up with a head full of fog and a heart full of doubt. Let them talk, I thought. If one other woman hears it and thinks, maybe I am not crazy either, then the gossip will have done some good. Later, Daniel and I stood together by the front window. The silver teapot gleamed on the shelf beside us, innocent again. "Do you think anyone will forgive me?" he asked, "for not seeing it, for defending her?" "You are asking the wrong question," I said. He frowned. "Then what should I ask? Can you forgive yourself?" I said, "because that is the weight you will have to carry every morning." He looked back out at the streetlights. "I don't know yet." "That is all right," I answered. "Some forgiveness arrives slowly, like steam from a kettle." We watched the neighborhood settle down for the night. Houses lit up, then darkened one by one. Behind each window, someone was cooking, arguing, laughing, hiding. My story no longer lived in private. It had stepped out onto the sidewalk in daylight, with uniformed witnesses and signed forms. The humiliation of that was real. But so was the freedom. People like Lila rely on shadows. Today there were none left for her in my home. When the sky turned black, I closed the curtains. Tomorrow would bring more questions from detectives, more forms from lawyers, more careful looks from neighbors. But whatever the next day held, it would unfold inside a house that had chosen once and for all to stand on the side of the truth. Thank you. The days after Lila was taken away moved softly, like pages turning in a book I had already read too many times. The house felt strangely quiet, but not in the painful way it had before. This new quiet felt gentle, like a deep breath after months of holding everything in. For the first time in a long while, the walls didn't feel as though they were listening to me, judging me, or waiting for something terrible to happen. They simply existed, and I could finally exist with them. The morning following her arrest, I stepped into the kitchen expecting tension, but instead found sunlight settling peacefully on the counter. It touched the silver teapot, the same one that once hid all my suspicions, and now it glowed the way it used to when my husband polished it on slow Sunday afternoons. I placed my palm on its cool surface and whispered, "We're safe now." Maybe I was speaking to myself, maybe to the house, maybe to memories that still drifted like dust in the corners. Either way, it felt true. I made tea as I always did, using a fresh, sealed bag. I watched it steep slowly, the color spreading like watercolor in warm water. Even that simple act felt different. I didn't rush. I didn't question. I didn't fear. The steam rose calmly instead of choking me with worry. When I tasted the first sip, I realized how long it had been since I trusted anything warm enough to drink. Later that morning, Daniel knocked on the door. He didn't just show up, he knocked politely, like a son visiting his mother instead of a man whose life had fallen apart overnight. When I opened the door, his face looked older than it had the week before. He carried guilt in his shoulders, exhaustion in his eyes, and a strange softness in his voice. "Mom," he said. Just that one word, but it trembled. I pulled him into a hug. He sank into it the way he used to as a child, when the world scared him more than he could admit. We stood in the doorway for a long moment, neither of us ready to let go. When he finally stepped back, he wiped his face and looked around the house as if seeing it for the first time. "It feels different," he whispered. "Yes," I said. It finally can. We sat in the living room with 2 cups of tea. He wrapped his hands around the mug even though it was too warm, as if he needed something steady to hold on to. He stared at the floor for a long time, searching for a question he wasn't sure he wanted answered. "I should have seen it," he said eventually. "I should have known." "No," I told him. "You were meant to trust your partner. That isn't a flaw." "But she hurt you," he whispered, "right under my nose." "She hid it well," I said. "People like her always do." His eyes filled again. He apologized more times than I needed to hear. I didn't forgive him, not fully, but I didn't blame him either. This healing wasn't about assigning guilt. It was about reclaiming space inside myself. As the hours passed, Daniel helped me clean the house. We threw away bottles, jars, herbs, and anything Lila might have touched with hidden intentions. The air shifted with every open window. Curtains lifted like tired sighs finally released. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt rinsed, aired out, refreshed. By the end of the week, my routine slowly returned. I walked through the garden in the mornings again. I trimmed mint leaves and replanted lavender. I swept the porch and wiped the windowsills, discovering how much life had paused while I lived in survival mode. Even the birds seemed louder, as if welcoming me back. Daniel visited every other day. Some days he talked, some days he simply sat nearby, needing quiet company. We shared meals, memories, and long stretches of silence that didn't ache the way they once did. Healing rarely arrives suddenly. It arrives in pieces, in cups of tea, in afternoon walks, in familiar footsteps returning to the kitchen. One afternoon, as I watered the plants beside the porch, my neighbor Mrs. Barlow walked over. She held a small bundle of daisies and an even smaller smile. "I noticed the lights haven't been flickering at strange hours anymore," she said gently. It was her way of telling me she had seen the signs too, even if she hadn't wanted to intrude. I thanked her for always waving, always being present, always being silently protective. Her kindness warmed a corner of me I didn't realize had gone cold. A few days later, I visited the community center for the first time in months. The director, Camille, greeted me with bright eyes and a scarf as blue as calm water. "We've missed you," she said. I could only respond with the truth. "I've missed myself." She laughed softly, the way women laugh when they know exactly what you mean. She introduced me to a program called Kitchen Truth, designed to help older women document their groceries, medicines, daily routines, and any signs of manipulation. The idea felt strangely personal. Camille asked if I wanted to help, and without thinking too hard, I said yes. Turning my experience into something useful felt like reclaiming the narrative instead of being trapped by it. During the first session, I told the group, I didn't survive because I was brave. I survived because I paid attention. The room grew still. Several women nodded, a few teared up. Every one of them held a story they had swallowed to keep peace. Seeing them reminded me that my experience, painful as it was, belonged to a much larger truth. In the evenings, I returned home tired but lighter. I brewed chamomile tea, opened the windows, and let the house breathe with me. The walls no longer felt like witnesses to something terrible. They felt like partners in healing. Healing didn't come like thunder. It came like steam rising from a safe cup of tea, quiet, slow, honest. And as I sat with my warm mug one night, listening to the house settle peacefully around me, I realized something simple but profound. I wasn't just living again. I was finally living for myself. Sometimes healing arrives in the quiet moments, long after the world has stopped watching. For me, it arrived on a soft morning when sunlight touched the edge of my kitchen table, and I realized I didn't feel afraid anymore. That kind of peace doesn't shout. It settles. It learns the shape of the room. It becomes part of your breath. I sat by the window with a cup of tea, steam rising in slow curls, and let the stillness wash over me. The house felt honest. Every corner that once held secrets now held light. Every room that once carried tension now carried truth. And in that truth, I finally found a place to put my heart. My name is Claire Thompson. I am 68 years old, and for the first time in a long time I can say this without shaking. I trust myself again. People assume that surviving something painful turns you into steel. They imagine you walking away sharper, stronger, unbreakable. But the truth is softer than that. Healing is not about becoming harder, it's about becoming clearer. It's about learning the difference between fear and instinct, between silence and wisdom, between keeping peace and losing yourself. I often think about the months when I lived in my own home like a guest. I cooked meals with hands that trembled. I walked through hallways that used to feel safe. I questioned my memory, my judgment, even my worth. All because someone spoke gently while doing something cruel. It's frightening how easily kindness can be used as a cover for control. People ask how I knew something was wrong. I always give the same answer. I paid attention to what didn't feel right, not to what I was told. When someone insists you're confused, ask why they need you to believe that. When someone tries to manage your life, ask what part of your independence threatens them. Quiet control is still control. It just whispers instead of shouts. If you're listening to this, maybe you understand that feeling, the sense that something is off, even if you can't prove it yet. Maybe you've been called dramatic, forgetful, emotional, unreasonable. Maybe someone tried to shrink you until you barely recognized yourself. I want you to hear this clearly. You are not imagining things. Your discomfort is information. Your anxiety is a warning. Your instincts are not foolish, they are protective. My daughter-in-law underestimated me because I grew older. She forgot that age doesn't erase wisdom, it deepens it. She saw my slow steps and soft voice and thought they meant weakness. But I come from a generation of women who survived without saying a word. We learned to read danger in the silence between sentences. We learned to endure storms without ever letting the roof collapse. We learned to bend without breaking. The day I gathered my evidence, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, clarity. I realized that if I didn't protect myself, no one else could. Not even my son, who loved me but couldn't see past the fog she created around him. That was the hardest part, knowing he didn't choose her cruelty, but he lived inside it. Forgiving him took time, gentleness, and honesty. Forgiving myself took even longer. People think revenge stories are about punishing the other person. But the truth is, poetic justice is not about hurting someone back. It's about restoring balance. It's about returning to yourself. It's about choosing truth over fear. What happened to Lila wasn't revenge, it was accountability. And accountability is simply truth with paperwork. After she was taken away, someone asked me if I felt victorious. I didn't. I just felt clean. There is a quiet strength in knowing you didn't become the monster someone else tried to be. There is dignity in choosing evidence over rage, strategy over chaos, truth over silence. Some evenings when the house is completely still, I think about everything that happened. Not with bitterness, but with awareness. I think about the women who never get the chance to speak up, the women who doubt themselves into silence, the women who swallow fear because they love the people who hurt them. And I wonder how many of them are sitting right now with a knot in their stomach, trying to decide whether to trust their instincts or bury them. If you are one of them, I want to offer you this. Write things down. Trust the small details. Listen to the quiet. And never let someone convince you that your voice doesn't matter. Truth doesn't need permission to exist. It just waits for you to stop apologizing for noticing it. These days, I'm learning to live gently again. I've returned to my garden. I've joined a community program helping other women document their lives and protect their independence. I've rebuilt my relationship with Daniel, slowly, like stitching something delicate. And at night, when I make tea, I breathe in the steam without fear. The scent is different now, cleaner, brighter, real. Healing has a smell, and for me it smells like chamomile and mint. Sometimes when the sun sets just right, I ask myself the question I know you're wondering too. Would I do it all differently if I could? And the truth is, no. Everything unfolded exactly the way it needed to for me to see clearly again. But now I want to ask you something. If someone walked into your home, smiled sweetly, and slowly rearranged your life piece by piece, if someone tried to make you doubt your own mind, if someone hid cruelty behind kindness, what would you have done? Would you have confronted them early? Would you have waited and watched? Would you have gathered proof like quiet armor? If you were standing where I stood, would you have forgiven them? Or would you have chosen truth over peace? Only you can answer that. And your answer might just tell you more about yourself than you think.